Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. I used to think silence in a marriage meant safety, comfort, maybe a kind of peace. But I've come to realize silence can mean something else entirely. It can be contempt dressed in calm. And contempt, I've learned, is louder than any argument. For a long time, I thought we were okay. We had a house, steady jobs, a social circle. No screaming matches, no slam doors. But what I didn't see, what I refused to see, was the slow erosion underneath. It wasn't yelling that hollowed us out. It was the mockery, the small digs, the smirks, the way she looked at me like she was tolerating my presence instead of sharing a life. It was during dinner with some old friends when I really felt it. There were 6 of us, me, her, and 2 other couples, crowded around a patio table with grilled salmon, a few half-empty bottles of wine, and that late evening glow that usually makes things feel softer. They were all laughing about something from college, and I chimed in with a story about our first vacation. It was this dorky, spontaneous trip to Maine, back when we were still new, still curious about each other. I said something like, she was freezing the whole time, but she still dragged me out to see the sunrise every morning. Before I could finish, she cut in, because I thought maybe it would warm up your personality. She smirked, sipped her wine. The laughter around the table wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough. I smiled through it. What else could I do? But something about the way she said it, not playful, not affectionate, just mean and calculated, like it was something she'd been wanting to say, and now she had an audience. Later that night, I asked her about it. Quietly, gently. I wasn't trying to fight, just trying to understand. She shrugged. It was a joke. Relax. You're too emotional. That phrase. I didn't realize how many ways it could be used to disarm someone. Too emotional, too sensitive, too reactive. It was her favorite trick. Say something cruel, then accuse me of overreacting if I noticed. Like I was the problem for feeling something. Like masculinity meant swallowing whatever disrespect came with her approval. I let it go. Or at least, I pretended to. But something shifted after that night. I started noticing how often she did it. Those little digs slipped in between sips of coffee or over text messages. How she corrected me in front of her friends, laughed when I talked about work, rolled her eyes when I made plans. Always small, always subtle, but never kind. Once, during a family brunch, she said, "He's great, super reliable. Like a German washing machine. Not exciting, but dependable." Her mother laughed so hard she nearly choked on her mimosa. The worst part? I laughed too. Because what was I supposed to do? Stand up in front of a table full of people and say, "That hurts"? You can't make someone love you by asking them to stop laughing at you. And you can't defend yourself without looking fragile when the person you love weaponizes irony. But it started to stick. That phrase, "You're too emotional." As if caring deeply, wanting connection, needing respect, that made me weak. Or worse, made me less of a man. She stopped saying, "I love you" first. She stopped touching me when we walked past each other in the kitchen. She stopped asking about my day. I told myself it was work, hormones, stress, something passing. But deep down, I knew. She wasn't withdrawing. She was mocking quietly, constantly, and calling it humor. That was the part that gnawed at me the most. Not that she'd grown distant, but that she seemed to take some secret satisfaction in watching me twist myself into knots to maintain what she didn't even respect. And I twisted, all right. For months. I kept trying. Because I remembered who she used to be. Because I thought maybe I could remind her. Because men are supposed to stay and fix. But something had already cracked. Not in the marriage, no. In me. And once something cracks, it doesn't take much to shatter. I tried talking to her again a week later. Not accusing, not dramatic, just honest. I told her I missed us. That I missed how we used to be. I said I didn't expect every day to feel like the honeymoon phase. But I wanted to feel like I mattered again, that the marriage still meant something to her. She stared at me for a moment, like I was speaking a language she didn't understand. "God," she said, setting her phone down with a thud, "you make it sound like I'm the villain in some soap opera." I told her it wasn't about villains. It was about partnership, about kindness. She rolled her eyes. "You're just so dramatic lately. Everything's a crisis with you." That was her defense mechanism. Any emotional need I expressed became melodrama. If I brought up something that hurt me, it was either exaggerated or imaginary. And I started to realize it wasn't that she didn't understand me, it was that she didn't care to. She didn't have time for that. But she always had time for her friends. There was a new group she'd become close with over the past year. A collection of women who spent more time laughing at their husbands than loving them. Brunches turned into girls' nights, and those nights became longer, more frequent, and more filtered through a lens of sarcasm and wine-soaked superiority. I met them a few times. They were charming in that performative way people are when they know they don't respect you. One of them, Stacy, I think, once called me House Husband of the Year when I mentioned I'd been doing most of the cooking lately. They all laughed like it was a compliment. It was clear what the game was. These weren't just women venting about relationships. These were women who had built an entire identity around pretending they didn't need the men they were still choosing to live with. Like marriage was some outdated joke, and their husbands were punchlines they hadn't figured out how to ditch yet. And my wife? She was their star comic. I found out about the bachelorette dinner through her sister. Apparently, there was a game they played, things you'd never tolerate if you weren't married. According to her sister, my wife's answer was monogamy with a man who thinks compliments count as foreplay. Everyone thought it was hilarious. Her sister said it like she was passing along an amusing anecdote. I just nodded. I thanked her for telling me. Then I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection for a full 15 minutes, wondering when I became the man someone would say that about. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even bring it up when she got home, because by then, something inside me had already gone quiet. It wasn't grief. Not yet. It wasn't even rage. It was something colder. I started watching her, not in a suspicious way, but in a curious one. Like I was trying to understand a stranger who had moved into my wife's body. She didn't smile at me unless someone else was watching. She didn't touch me unless she needed something. She talked to me like a roommate she couldn't wait to be rid of. And still, I kept playing the part. I made dinner. I took care of the house. I listened to her stories, even the ones where I was the unspoken punchline. Because somewhere, deep down, I was still hoping that if I loved her hard enough, long enough, the version of her I once knew would come back. But hope has a half-life. It decays in silence. And hers was becoming louder by the day. One night I was in bed reading when she walked in and dropped a package on the floor next to the dresser. New lingerie. The kind she used to buy for me. The kind that used to mean something. I looked up, and she caught my eye. She smirked. Don't worry, it's not for you. Then she laughed. Like it was a joke. Like she expected me to laugh too. I didn't. I just went back to my book. And for the first time in a long time, she looked unsettled. It was brief. A flicker, really. But I saw it. That crack in the performance. That little flash of realization that maybe, just maybe, the game she'd been playing had a consequence she hadn't considered. She didn't know it yet. But the man she kept trying to shame into becoming smaller? He wasn't breaking. He was walking. Silently. Calmly. And soon completely. I didn't leave right away. That's not how these things happen. Not when you've been in it as long as I had. Not when you've built your life around someone, even if that someone stopped seeing you as a person a long time ago. No, first, you start by letting go piece by piece. You stop explaining yourself. You stop asking if they're okay. You stop reaching out across that cold space in the bed. And eventually, you stop hoping they'll notice the distance, or worse, care enough to close it. That week after the lingerie incident, I made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to fight for someone who treated me like the punchline to her private jokes anymore. I didn't tell her. I didn't announce anything. I didn't need the drama or the tears or the sudden, performative regret. I knew her too well to fall for that. If I told her I was thinking of leaving, she'd either laugh it off or turn it into an ego contest. I didn't want her to win me back. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to lose me without ever realizing she'd already thrown me away. So I just began to fade. I stopped making dinner. I started working later, or at least pretending to. I took walks in the evening, long ones, with no destination in mind. I joined a gym, nothing intense, just enough to feel like I was reclaiming some control over my body, over myself. I didn't initiate conversation unless necessary. And when she threw her barbed little comments my way, I didn't flinch. I didn't laugh. I didn't argue. I just looked at her the way you look at someone you once loved in another lifetime. She noticed. She didn't say anything, but I saw the confusion creep in. The power dynamic was changing, and she could feel it like a draft through a window she thought was shut tight. One night, as I walked past her in the hallway, she said, "So, are you depressed, or just sulking?" I stopped, turned, and looked at her, not with anger, not with sadness. Just clarity. "Neither," I said. "Just done pretending." She blinked. That one she didn't have a comeback for. That weekend, I packed a single duffel bag with enough clothes for a few weeks. Some essentials. A passport I hadn't used in years. I didn't overthink it. I just packed light, like someone traveling somewhere they might never come back from. She was out with her friends, of course. Brunch, she'd said, but she never came back before midnight from those brunches anymore. I left the house key on the kitchen table. Didn't write a note. Didn't leave a voicemail. I didn't know her that. Not after months, years of mockery disguised as wit. Not after she made our marriage into a stage for her sarcasm. The last thing I did before walking out was take one last look at the living room. The walls we painted together. The couch we picked out. The photos, so many of them, where we looked like people in love. Maybe we were, once. Maybe she was. But somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me as a person and started treating me like furniture. Familiar. Functional. Easy to lean on. Easier to ignore. So I left. Quietly. Peacefully. And it wasn't dramatic, or cinematic, or triumphant. It was just done. I got in the car and drove 2 hours to a friend's cabin he'd offered me years ago, back when we both joked about running away from the noise of life. No one was there. No Wi-Fi. No reception. Just silence. The kind that didn't cut like contempt, but settled like still water. The first night I slept through without waking up anxious. The second, I started sketching again. Something I hadn't done since before we were married. By the fourth day, I realized I hadn't thought about her once. I wasn't numb. I was healing. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to make room for me in my own life. I don't know exactly when she realized I was gone, not just physically, but emotionally. I imagine it didn't hit her right away. She probably came home, saw the empty closet space, the missing shoes by the door, the faint echo of silence where I used to fill the room with small talk and soft presence, and told herself I was being dramatic. She probably laughed to one of her friends about it. He left? What? Does he think I'm going to chase him? Maybe she even believed that for a while. But silence isn't the absence of noise. It's the absence of attention, of energy, of gravity. And that's what she started to feel, the strange stillness that creeps in when someone who always showed up for you just doesn't anymore. She texted me 3 days after I left. Hey, I noticed you took your stuff. Everything okay? I read it from the cabin porch, coffee in one hand, a pencil in the other, sketching the tree line like it was more familiar than her face. I didn't respond. For days later, another one. If this is about what I said last week, you're really overreacting. Still no response. Then the voicemails came. The first was short, defensive. You can't just walk away like this without talking to me. That's not how adults solve problems. The second one, 2 days later, was more clipped. Look, if you're trying to make some kind of point, you've made it. Can we talk like normal people now? The third, almost a week later, was quiet. Hesitant. Her voice softer than I'd heard in months. I miss you. That one lingered a little longer in my ears, I'll admit. Not because I believed it, but because for the first time, she didn't sound like she was performing for someone else. But I still didn't call. Because I hadn't left to punish her. I left because staying had become a slow form of erasure. Meanwhile, back in the city, things were changing. Our friends, those perfect, polished couples we used to brunch with, started pulling back. I heard from one of the husbands I was still close with that she was acting strange. Desperate for validation. Bringing up my name too much. She laughed it off at first, he said. Told everyone you'd be back in a week. But now she just seems unmoored. Unmoored. I like that word. Because it didn't mean punished. It meant adrift. And that was the consequence she never expected. Not revenge. Not exposure. Irrelevance. No one tells you how fast the world moves when you're no longer in orbit around someone. She had always relied on me to be her center, even if she hated me for it. I planned our holidays, remembered her parents' birthdays, dealt with the landlord, kept the car registered, paid the bills on time. I made everything quiet and steady. And when she stopped appreciating that, I didn't fight her. I just let the silence she loved have its full effect. And it did. By week 3, she came to my office. I wasn't there. One of my coworkers said she looked thrown off, not angry. Confused. She left a note. Please come home. Or at least call me. I didn't mean any of it. I was just tired. We both were. I folded the note and set it aside. I didn't tear it up. I didn't keep it either. I just let it sit. Later that night, I checked her social media. I don't know why. Curiosity, I guess. What used to be endless photos, group shots, smiling faces, aesthetic brunches had gone quiet. Her last post was almost 2 weeks ago. A black and white photo of the skyline, captioned, "Some silences are louder than screams." I didn't like it. I didn't comment. But I saw it. And I think that was the first time it hit her. No one was listening anymore. The friends who used to clap for her jokes were busy with their own families. The sister who encouraged her sharp tongue wasn't offering sympathy anymore, just silence. And me? I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. She showed up at my office on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced. I had just wrapped a meeting and stepped into the hallway when I saw her standing there, arms folded. I was already scanning the room like she was trying to figure out if I was alone. Her posture was tight, like someone trying to look composed while holding something cracked together from the inside. I didn't speak first. I just waited. "I've been trying to reach you," she said. Her voice was calm, but off-kilter, like someone reading from a script they didn't fully believe in anymore. "I know." There was a pause. She looked around, like she couldn't stand still, like the silence between us was too loud. "Can we talk?" "Just somewhere private." I didn't want to humiliate her. I didn't want a scene. So I nodded and led her into the small conference room down the hall. She sat. I didn't. Her eyes scanned me, looking for something: anger, softness, hope. I gave her none of it. "You made your point," she said finally. "Okay. You left. You showed me how it feels." I stayed quiet. She leaned forward. "But if this was supposed to be some punishment, some moral lesson, it worked." "I get it. I didn't leave to punish you," I said, voice level. "I left because staying became a slow death." That stopped her. She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to sound so done. "You never said you were unhappy." "No," I said. "I showed you. For years. I just did it the way I did everything else, with patience, consistency, effort. You were too busy laughing at me to notice." She bit her lip. "I thought we were just going through a phase." I gave a small, tired smile. "No. A phase is something you outgrow together. This was something you grew into alone." She looked away then. Her voice dropped. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't have to mean it. You just had to keep doing it." I saw the tears forming, but I didn't react. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I'd already given her every version of myself that could be hurt. That version didn't exist anymore. "You used to tell me I was your best friend," she whispered. "You used to act like it." That one landed. Her shoulders sagged. "So that's it? You're just gone." I thought about that. I thought about all the versions of myself I bent and folded to fit into her life, until I realized the shape she wanted was someone she could mock without guilt. "I'm not angry," I told her. "I don't hate you. But I won't be your emotional punching bag disguised as a husband." She stood slowly, her voice barely audible now. "I thought you'd at least try to fight for us." I looked her dead in the eyes. "You don't get to mock the marriage for years, then demand a war when the other person walks away." She opened her mouth, closed it again. I stepped aside and opened the door for her. She hesitated, waiting for something, one last plea, maybe. One last moment where I'd reach out and say, "Let's fix it." But that moment never came. "You always said you'd never give up on us," she said quietly. "I didn't," I replied. "You did. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise." She walked out without another word. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I felt nothing dramatic. No rush of triumph. No cinematic swell of emotion. Just stillness. Peace. The kind that comes when you stop trying to resuscitate something that flatlined long ago. I went back to my desk. There were emails to answer. Deadlines to meet. A life, my life, waiting to be lived. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't living it for anyone else.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.